of September, and they're only maybe as
I'm
far
on
as
the Erie
Milwaukee or
Canal
Chicago.
cruise.
So what those people have to do, because they live on those boats, they're at home, they can't leave them, they have to turn back. So they come back, we see them anytime from the middle of October to the middle of November, when the canal officially closes for the year. And where they're going is they're going to head south someplace. Florida, the Bahamas, maybe the Caribbean.
He's talking about other cruise lines.
And they'll wait for the opening of the Erie Canal the next year, which is typically May 1st every year. So sometime in April, they'll begin leaving Florida and starting to come back to time the Erie Canal, which is the whole trick to doing that trip. I've been lucky enough in my life to have completed that trip twice, and I will talk a little bit about that on the way back. Right now we're going to spin around. We're going to head east to a little town called Jacksonburg, which is our destination today. It has one of the most historically correct locks left on the system, Lock 18. When we get there, we're going to tell you all about that. Right now, as we spin around, we get her straightened out. I'm going to go in the pilot house. I'll start that first CD. And then I'll be live again in about 14 minutes, 12 3/4 seconds approximately.
This is fun.
Perfect day for a cruise. Light breeze.
About 100
not
degrees out
overbearing
there.
sun. Warm. This is the kind of day that the Chamber of Commerce's want every day.
Driving it.
Okay, she's turned around and we're heading eastbound to Jacksonburg, a small town with few residents. So small, in fact, they don't even have their own zip code. Jacksonburg's claim to fame is our destination. One of the most historically correct locks left on the New York State Canal System, Lock 18. We're on the Mohawk River section of the Erie Canal, but the Mohawk is about to leave us. If you look under the bridge on our port side at about 11 o'clock, those green structures are not more bridges, but Mohawk-style movable dams. And there goes the Mohawk over those dams, dropping down about 7 feet and continuing on. We're about to leave the river and enter into an artificial man-made section of the canal known as a land cut, L-A-N-D-C-U-T. As we come under the bridge, we'll be going under those large green guillotine-looking dock structures. These are guard gates. There are 24 sets of these gates on the canal, usually where a river and a land cut separate. The guard gates are used as flood control mechanisms. When flooding occurs, the gates are lowered and fit into a concrete sill under the water. They block high water from entering the land cut and possibly damaging the lock, which is 5 miles ahead of us. The water is diverted back into the Mohawk River on the other side of Plantation Island on our port side. Today, this island is a wildlife management area. Guard gates also have another use. The canal is open every year from the beginning of May through November 15th. When the canal closes for the season, the guard gates are lowered and the water is diverted back to the river. Then the lock valves are opened and most of the water is drained from this land cut. In the winter, the water in this area will only be a narrow ribbon with the banks exposed. The land cuts are drained in order to perform maintenance on the locks and embankments while the canal is closed. The Mohawk-style movable dams are very unique. They're only found on the Mohawk River section of the Erie Canal. And unlike a typical dam that has a fixed height or crest, these dams are a series of steel plates that can be raised or lowered by motors to regulate the water depth. The dam's job is to make sure the water depth in the land cut is at least 12 feet deep, but when the water rises about 2.5 feet above the normal depth, that's considered to be a flood condition and the guard gates are lowered to protect the lock. In 2006 and again in 2013, we had so-called 500-year floods. So the guard gates were lowered and the dam raised. They did their job perfectly. In this area, the water never was more than 2 to 3 feet higher than normal. But on the other side of the island, the raising of the dams see some evidence of that flooding as we travel through the lock in a little while. You may have noticed the aids to navigation as we're cruising. A green square on our starboard side that we've already passed, and a red triangle on our port. These aids are marking the deep water of the land cut. Because the land cut is man-made and not natural, the deep water pretty much extends from shore to shore. Notice they're on posts and not floating buoys. When they're on posts, they're called day markers. In areas where the water is lowered for the winter, posts can be used as they'll be high and dry and won't suffer any ice damage. The Mohawk is running parallel to us on the other side of Plantation Island, and after we're lowered through the lock, we'll rejoin it. The land cut avoids the nasty section of the river that drops almost 20 feet in 5 miles and has severe turns and rapids. Heading eastbound as we are, this is how we could travel the Florida by boat. We could actually go from here to Key West, a distance of about 1,900 miles, and then that whole trip would only have to be in the ocean for 35 miles. Here's how we make that trip. We continue east through 18 locks until we came out of the Hudson River. At the Hudson, we'll head south for about 150 miles until we came to New York City. Then we'll go out under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge into the lower harbor and off Sandy Hook, New Jersey. And that'll be where we have to spend those 35 miles in the ocean. From Sandy Hook to Manasquan, New Jersey, where we'll enter the inlet and hook up with our next inland waterway, the New Jersey Intercoastal. We'll head south on that waterway until we get to the southern tip of New Jersey, Cape May. At Cape May, we still don't have to go in the ocean because the New Jersey Intercoastal at Cape May is interconnected to Delaware Bay by a small 4-mile-long canal, the Cape May Canal. Once through that canal and in Delaware Bay, we'll head in a generally northerly direction, and in 4 or 5 hours, we'll be on the lower Delaware River. Just before we reach the Wilmington, Delaware area, we'll make a turn to port and enter yet another canal, the C&D Canal, the Chesapeake and Delaware, which links the lower Delaware River with upper Chesapeake Bay. The C&D is 14 miles long and is a vital link in our waterway system. Most bridges on the Erie Canal have vertical bridge clearances of about 22 feet, but the bridges on the C&D have vertical clearances of up to 175 feet. The C&D can handle vessels up to 1,000 feet long, everything from propane carriers to cruise ships. Some of our naval vessels even use it as a shortcut from the Atlantic to their base at Norfolk, Virginia. So we'll travel through the C&D to upper Chesapeake Bay. Then we'll head south for about 220 miles until we reach Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk is mile zero, the beginning of our federal intracoastal waterway, ICW for short. Heading south on the ICW, we'll go through the states of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and then finally Florida and Key West. Never again having to go out in the ocean, just the 35 miles off the Jersey coast. Most yachts take 15 to 30 days to make that trip, but the liberal captains in a hurry can make it in a week if they're willing to use the ocean. Now, once we get to Key West, we can continue our trip if we'd like. So we have a decision to make. Do we go to port or starboard? Well, if we go to port, about 9 hours later, we'll be in Havana, Cuba. And now that Americans can travel to Cuba legally, we and our money will be welcomed with open arms. If we decide to go to starboard, we can go from Key West all the way to Mexico, mostly on inland waterways. Here's how that trip would go. We'd head north from Key West past the 10,000 islands to Naples, where we'd be able to get on our next inland waterway, the West Coast Intracoastal. Heading north, we go to Fort Myers, San Miguel Island, Sarasota, half of St. Petersburg, and Clearwater, and the small Greek fishing village of Tarpon Springs. The West Coast Intracoastal comes to an end. From Tarpon Springs, we'll have to go across the exposed waters of the Gulf of Mexico for about 150 miles to Caramel, Florida. There we can pick up the next inland waterway, the Gulf Coast Intracoastal. Heading west, we'll go through Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and finally Texas, eventually getting to the other mile zero of the federal intercoastal waterway at Brownsville, Texas, on the Mexican border. So we can cruise from here to Mexico, a trip of about 37 this canal is today. In this area, the original canal is close by and we see some parts of it. However, in many parts of the state, the original canal and today's canal are separated by 11 to 12 miles. Today, the Erie Barge Canal has been renamed. It's now simply called the Erie Canal, part of the New York State Canal System. The system consists of 4 canals. The one we're on, the Erie, 340 miles long with 35 locks. It runs from the Hudson River on the east to Buffalo on the west. The Champlain Canal, 64 miles long with 11 locks. It links the Erie Canal and the Hudson River into Canada. The Oswego Canal, 24 miles long with 7 locks. It links the Erie west of Syracuse north to Lake Ontario. And the 4th canal, the Cayuga-Seneca, 27 miles long with 4 locks. It links the Erie west of Syracuse south to the Finger Lakes. The whole system is 524 miles long with 57 locks and is still completely navigable. The locks have different vertical lifts, but each lock has the same size chamber, 328 feet long and 45 feet wide. The locks are now designed. Before construction started in 1905, it was discovered the Welland Canal in Canada was planning on widening its locks to 45 feet. New York didn't want to miss out on any Canadian shipping business, so the Erie's locks were redesigned to 45 feet. When this canal was completed in 1918, the total cost was only $151 million. If it was attempted to duplicate this canal today, the cost would be at least $2.5 to $3 billion. That's billion with a B. However, due to environmental considerations, it's doubtful a canal such as this could be built today. This canal system is the only remaining fully operational canal system in the United States and is a national treasure. In December of 2000, the federal government recognized the role the Erie Canal played in the development of the United States and designated all 524 miles of our country's 23rd National Heritage Corridor. Not only is this designation a great honor, but it has also begun a process of historic preservation and economic growth through heritage tourism. In a few moments, coming up on our starboard side, where there's a break in the trees, is one of the oldest surviving churches in New York State. When we get there, we'll slow down, tap the horn, and point it out. Your photo will be from the starboard side. Okay, Captain Jerry Live again. Excuse me for a couple minutes here. Down, that's called mass stepping. And in order to clear the bridges on the Erie Canal, all sailboats have to become power boats while they're on the canal, or they wouldn't get under the bridges. So there's mast stepping services on each end of the canal to take your mast down and put it back up. It's about $150 on an average sailboat to do that on each end. If you look over to your right, you see the sandbar sticking out. That's a leftover remnant of our flood of 2013. At one time, that sandbar was pretty much all the way across the waterway, and they had to come in and dredge it out. Now, the Canal Corp are the people that run the canal for the state. They have 350 employees and 200 vessels. The average age of the vessels is 83 years old. The oldest one is actually 114, and it still works. And they all work. The problem is there aren't enough people in the field to follow those, so things happen very slowly here. Now, if you look, another remnant of the flood of 2013 is that green floating buoy off our port bow. Normally, that buoy would be right up against the bank on the right, the land side. But we have a little creek there called Spooner Creek. Everything came down from the hills in the flood of 2013 and plugged up that whole opening there. So everything to the right of that buoy is not navigable. We can't go through there. We have to go between the buoy and the island on the left. Now that's still from 2013. They haven't gotten to it yet. And you can just barely pass one boat through there at a time, let alone 2 or 3. So we have to be careful about any boats coming the other way. Hopefully they'll get that dredged back out sometime in the next year. Now, maybe at that gap in the trees where that church is, as we get there, I'll slow up. I'm going to try to land us in that little opening there that you can get a good view and a good photo of this. And when we get there, I'm going to let the CD tell you all about the church. And I will tap the horn. Now, everybody to my left, over here, you're standing right by the horn, so no jumping overboard when I do this. It's a very loud horn.
I know. I got it.
It started off as a single-story log cabin. It was burned and rebuilt twice. At one time, there were 8 buildings at this site, which made up Fort Herkimer. The fort served during both the French and Indian Wars and the American Revolution. At one time, the church had 26 gun ports in its walls and a swing gun in the cupola. It was the easternmost defense of the fort. In 1812, the gun ports were sealed up and the swing gun removed. Recently, several of the old gun ports, or loopholes as they were often referred to, have been reopened. Today, all that remains of the fort is the church, and like the Erie Canal, it's a national treasure and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Nowadays, the church is generally open for services twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas. The church is also a sought-after wedding site. It is possible to contact a curator and make an appointment to see the inside. There are several other important historic elements at this site. On the way back, we'll slow down and talk about them. The first Erie Canal was, without a doubt, the most important transportation system ever built in the United States. Only the Transcontinental Railway and the Interstate Highway System could even begin to have the same economic, cultural, and social impact that the first Erie Canal had on a very, very young America. That first canal wasn't only about trade and transportation. It was about the communication of ideas. It was about religion. The Mormon and several other religious movements were born and flourished on the banks of the canal. It was about the women's rights movement, also born on the banks of the canal. It was about the Underground Railroad. The canal was used by escaped slaves to reach Canada in safety. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch to consider the first canal to be the internet of its day. It was our country's first attempt at networking and globalization. Imagine yourself back in the late 1700s when our country had 13 states, stretched out between Georgia on the south and Maine on the north. Those 13 states were sandwiched between the Atlantic Ocean on the east and the Appalachian Mountains on the west. In order for America to grow and prosper, a pathway to the west was needed. The Appalachians presented a very formidable barrier. West of those mountains were vast, mostly uninhabited lands owned by the United States and then referred to as the Northwest Territories. Those territories had many things America needed to grow. Long fertile plains that could be developed into farms, virgin timberlands that could be harvested for lumber, many natural resources, and the grand prize, our large inland seas, the Great Lakes. Back then, it took several weeks of hard travel to cross those mountains. It was a route that was virtually impossible to conduct commerce over. Technology didn't yet exist to blast through the mountains and create roads. Both dynamite and nitroglycerin had not yet been invented. All that existed was black powder, not a very effective tool to conquer those mountains. It would be necessary to find a way through those mountains so we could begin settling the west of Middle America. Luckily, nature had bestowed upon New York State the only low-level natural opening through those mountains between Georgia and Indiana. The Mohawk Valley and the Gorge have little fields. That gorge, 6 miles ahead of us, along with the Mohawk River, would make the dream of settling the Northwest Territories a reality. Instead of attempting to build roads, it appeared possible to build a canal across the state to open up the interior of our country. Congress of the United States recognized this need and passed legislation called the American System, authorizing construction of the first Erie Canal. When it was presented to President James Madison for his approval, he vetoed it. He felt it was unconstitutional to use federal funds for the benefit of only one state, New York. He didn't see the bigger picture of how the canal could help make America a superpower. That left New York to go alone. While the canal had many fathers, its foremost proponent and promoter was the then-prime mayor of New York City, Erie Canal. Beginning in 1809, he became the canal's champion and worked tirelessly to obtain support for the canal. But his speeches fell mostly on deaf ears. Back then, most people didn't believe another 6 years to complete the canal in October of 1825. The first canal was just a ditch. Didn't use any part of any river, lake, or stream. Back then, they didn't have the technology to canalize and tame the rivers and like flood them. So they built the first canal a little distance away from the rivers and 20 feet higher. So in the spring, when the rivers flooded, the canal wouldn't. Now, if I handed you a pickaxe and shovel and told you that building a ditch 40 feet wide and 4 feet deep cost 363 miles of wilderness and I'd pay you 80 cents a day, I'm pretty sure I know where you want me to put that pickaxe. But that's pretty much what happened. The first canal was built entirely by hand. At first by the farmers whose lands it crossed, and later by Irish, Scottish, and Italian immigrants. When the canal was completed, they really did have a canal that linked the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes. It was 40 feet wide and 4 feet deep. On the south side, there was a 5-foot berm that contained the water, and on the north side, a 10-foot wide towpath, because anything that was going to move on that first canal would have to be towed by mules or horses. There was no other form of motivation. And America was about to be introduced to a new folk hero, Old Sal the Mule. Old Sal left town 15 miles on the Erie Canal. I hope you folks up front know that song because that's what we usually choose to lead us in song on the way back. Relax, boy. The first canal ran 363 miles between Albany and Buffalo. It traveled through 83 lots, made of cut stone with wooden gates that had to be opened and closed by hand. Each lock could raise or lower vessels about 7 feet, because for a boat to use the Erie Canal from Albany to Buffalo, she had to be raised 565 feet, an amazing engineering feat for 1825. When the canal was completed, DeWitt Clinton wanted to be the first person to travel its entire length. So on October 26, 1825, he boarded a vessel in Buffalo named the Seneca Chief, and along with his wife, political dignitaries, and 2 kegs of fresh water from Lake Erie, they began making their way to New York City. It took 9 days, and the first thing they did when they got there was to go into the lower harbor of New York and distill those 2 kegs of fresh water from Lake Erie into the salt water of the Atlantic in a ceremony known as the Wedding of the Waters. That ceremony officially opened the canal, and the canal was an immediate success. Incredibly, the canal's cost was $7 million, which was Clinton's estimate. That probably made it the first and last government project to ever come in on budget. Before the canal existed, to ship goods between Albany and Buffalo, the charge was typically $125 a ton. But within 1 year of the canal's opening, it quickly became so efficient that the freight rate was brought down to as low as $5 a ton. There were 7 weigh locks along the canal. Today we call them tolls, where they weighed the boats and assessed the tolls. From the profits of the tolls collected, a total $7 million in bonds was paid off in the canal's first 9 years of operation. So the canal was paid off, New York State began making serious money, and became known as the Empire State. The canal turned out to be an amazing success story, and became known as the 8th wonder of the world. We're now going to interrupt the story because we're approaching Lock 18. We'll pick up the rest of this success story on the way back.
Well, I've never been on it before.
Okay, Captain Jerry live again. I'm going to come out on the wing now. We're going to be in 34 feet of water. Just before we get in, if you look over to your left, this is a spillway. It's dry today, but a week ago it was rip-roaring water there. That's a relief valve that when we have high water, rather than letting that water damage the machinery of the lock, it runs back into the river.
Drinking your Mountain Dew, that'll do it.
Miles, and if you look down,
feels like he's 7
you'll see it's quite a distance below us, 20 feet to be exact.
Oh no, I mean,
and that's
you
where we're
remember
going to
the
go
olden
back
days?
down into the river
The
that's
old
in front of
Mountain
us
Dew.
and over to the left of us, on the other side of the island.
They were coming
Our
into
lock
some
operator
rocks
on
now.
this end would appear to be
I don't remember.
Alec today. Pretty good guy. No, Alex. Excuse me. Alec is downstairs here.
Great, it's an hour and a half
Downstairs
cruise.
complained about
That ought
Alex
to
on the
relax
lock
me.
just yesterday.
But I'm feeling
I
bored
said, why?
already.
He's a really good guy. He said, well, Cap, you must not be paying attention because lately all he does is keep letting us
Oh,
down.
wonderful.
Oh, they get worse. They get worse.
There's the doors. Those are the doors right in front of the show you.
First thing a boat has to do when they come in a lock is tie up. That's a rule. That will be the first thing we're doing.
We're gonna
Once
go
we
through
get
a
tied up, I'll
lock. We're
describe
gonna go
how this
down the
all
lock.
works.
Very interesting how this canal came about.
See all the ropes that you hold on to? Hold them. See them?
Alrighty then.
See the water out there is big.
Oh, good.
Make it come out because it's all over.
We're gonna go down.
Oh, good. Oh, yes. Thank you. No. No, I like the skin.
328 feet. On this lock, the tunnel is 6
So it
feet
looks
tall
like
and 8
the
feet
water
wide.
is coming out.
All the way down at the bottom of the lock and each wall on either side of us.
He talks
Every
a lot.
30 feet are 3-foot openings called ports that lead back to the tunnel. That's how the water comes and goes. There are no pumps. This all happens by gravity. Water is seeking its own level.
They just open the,
This is an old
the other door
1905
just a
technology
little
you're
bit.
looking at here. There are a couple things that are not historically correct. I'll talk about them in a moment. So he has closed the gates behind us. He has lowered his valves. The white lights on the side of the motor box behind us indicates that the valves are down, so no more water can come in the lock. Now, if you look in front of us, we might have another lock operator here today. On Thursdays, there's 2 of them. The only day of the week there are. Otherwise, there's only 1. No, Alex is coming down. So
It's hard to stay
there is no
paying
other lock
attention to
operator
what
in that control station.
Talking
So
and talking.
the white light on the side of the motor box in front of us also means the valves on that end are
person
closed.
driving.
The yellow fenced-off
Captain.
area are valve pits. They're actually
Guess I should pay
1898 railroad
attention.
flat
So I'll call you
cars
back.
taken from the Philadelphia Transit
Bye.
Authority that year. They're 10 feet by 10 feet. They weigh 15,000 pounds. They run vertically on trolley track, raised and lowered by 5 horsepower motors. White light means they're down. They're blocking the tunnel. That's what's holding the water in the lock. Alex has to check the other side of his gate, make sure there aren't any small boats or fishing people there, because we create a ton of turbulence on the other side of that gate when we dump this water out. It'll be very smooth in here, but very rough on the other side. Once he determines that, he'll go in his little light control shack,
He's going in the weight shack. See him? Hold on.
and he'll begin raising the valves. When he begins raising the valves, the white lights are going to go out on the side of the motor box because the valves are coming off the bottom. And then the lights that take over are the 3-section light tree that's up on top of each motor box. When the lower light lights, that means the valves are open 1/3, then the second section 2/3, and then when all 3 sections are lit, they call that 3/3 here, fully open. We're going to dump out about 2.5 million gallons of water into the river in front of us. This will find its way to the Atlantic. We're going to do this all by gravity in about 7.5 minutes, and we're already down almost 2 feet. Very smooth ride on the way down. 2 things that stand out that are historically incorrect. While the walls themselves are 111 years old, that's the oldest section of them. The top 10 inches is not 111-year-old concrete. They relined these 26 years ago, so that's not 100-year-old concrete on the top 10 inches. The other thing that's historically incorrect are the lines hanging down with the blue and white floats. In the days when we had cargo, those lines didn't exist. What was here instead would have been 6 lock operators, 3 on each wall. When tugs, barges, oil ships, grain ships, cement ships came in, they would have helped the deckhands with their lines. They would have lifted them up or handed them down to them. Now their lines were about 5 times as thick. That's the lines you see here. These are 3/4 inch lines hanging down. And they were about 1.5 to 2 inches thick. Hawsers, they call them. And needed a lot of muscle to handle them. When this began the transition from a commercial waterway into a recreational waterway in the 70s, mid-70s, the way they afforded to do that is they went from a workforce back then of about 1,500 people down to today's level, which is only 350. So nowadays, except for Thursdays, we only have one lock operator on duty at a time. That doesn't allow him any time to help voters with lines. So in the early 1980s, they began hanging these lines down so voters could grab them and pin their own lines. A real simple system that works quite well. Square boxes recessed in the wall of the lock aren't too much in use today, except from the two large cruise ships that we have operating here, the Grand Mariner and the Grand Caribe. That's where the cargo ships or even those cruise ships would have put the hoop in their lines. Cruise ships and the cargo would always take up most of the lock. There wouldn't be any room for anything else. And they had to make sure that the tug, tow, barge, whatever was in, didn't move backwards and forwards and inadvertently hit into a gate and damage it. So they would set one line forward, one line aft. Those are called spring lines. And that would keep the tug and tow from moving forwards and backwards. The gate in front of us is 40 feet long, weighs 40 tons on each side. Interesting how it's shaped like a shallow letter V with the point of the V facing it. The originators of locks, that's called a minor V lock gate, by the way. The originators of locks were the Chinese back in the 4th century. But what they did is they put their gates in a straight line across from each other. So when the water got to maybe 5, 6, 7 feet deep at the most, the water pressure would force the gates to fail and push them open. It took a long time before a guy came along and invented the minor V lock gate. It was in the 1400s. His name was Leonardo da Vinci. He's the inventor of the minor V lock gate. To this day, he did such a great job, nobody's ever improved the design. About 95 or 96% of all lock gates in the world, anything new being built, are just like that. They're built bigger than the opening, face them upstream towards the high side of the water. So the deeper the water becomes, the more pressure you put on them, the stronger they become, not the weaker. And about the only way they can fail is to crack a wall, and that's one of the reasons the walls are 45 feet thick at the bottom. I have about a foot to go down. This is a 20-foot rock. Watch the center of the gate where they come together. The lock operator cannot turn on the motors to open those gates until the gates first come apart on their own and spread open. Water has to be exactly the same height on both sides, out in the river and here, or you burn out a motor. So you'll begin to see daylight come on, down right at the water line, the gates come together, and then that'll spread upwards and upwards. And when he feels that it's safe to go ahead and turn on the motors, he will. A lot of guys stand right on the divide and look down that they can see a water flow going both ways. Some guys just have an innate feeling or when that's right. Other guys mess up.
That's my wedding band and that's my engagement.
We had one mess up the other day.
Mama's got 3 bands. I know, man.
That was an interesting trip. We were about this long. He forgot to close the valves behind us, the upper valves, and pretty soon we were going back up. And then we had to go back down again. Here comes the daylight right now.
Hey, look it. It's starting to open. Look it.
Should be able to turn on the motors anytime.
The door is opening.
They're spring loaded, so when the water pressure equalizes, they just open by themselves like that.
The water's going to push the doors open.
Unless he's talking to his girlfriend, or wife, maybe both.
Is that cool?
Okay, straight back.
Is that because the water's coming our way, so it means it feels like we're going backwards. But remember,
Pretty interesting 1905 technology, huh? Smooth ride down.
Here we go. We did it.
As we come out of the lot, look at the concrete on the left, past the left gate, only on the left side. Embedded in the wall will be a vertical gauge painted white with numbers on it. You put the number 3 in front of the numbers you're about to see. That tells you where we are in relationship to sea level. So we should be about 363 and a half feet above sea level. And let's see where we are.
Climb up the rope. You are correct.
And that's just about almost perfect. 363 and a half.
It's growing on the left.
On the left.
I don't know.
We used to have a person here 24 hours a day, even though the locks closed at 5 o'clock. They're only open from 7 to 5. But we had to have a night watchman here every day, for 7 days a week, that would take a water reading off that gauge every hour, once an hour, and then radio, call it into the hydrology department in Albany, and from that they would make decisions whether to raise or lower the dams. This is the river coming back. That's the river we started in the Mohawk, coming back in. So now we're out of the artificial section, and we're back in the Mohawk River, the natural flow. 3 years ago, they installed those silver gizmos with the antennas and the solar panels, and now that all happens wirelessly.
And they want to see it first, except
Interesting story I'll tell you on the way back about our flood of 2013 and the night watchman story. Now you'll notice in the river we don't have day markers on posts. The reason for that is this water, unlike the land cut, cannot be lowered. This is a natural river. In fact, they take the dams totally out of the water in the winter. That's where they're going. And they let the water return, the river return to its natural flow. So if we had day markers on posts, ice would just knock them down. So instead they use floating buoys, which are held to the bottom with large blocks of concrete called dead men. They weigh anywhere from 200 to 1,400 pounds. These also have to come out in the winter, or ice would destroy them, but they're easy to get out. They come in here with a derrick barge, so there's 5 of them across the state. They're called SBS, self-propelled scow, that basically it's a barge with a motor and a derrick boom on it. And they come in and they take the buoys out and also the concrete blocks, the dead men, store them up on land for the winter. And then in the spring, when we get ready to reopen the canal, which is typically May 1st every year, around the first week in April, they begin setting these back. Now they have to go back to approximately the same spot because they're marking the deep water channel of the state. Until the year 2000, we were able to use GPS to spot where these go. But in 2000, we became a National Heritage Corridor, and now they want everything done as historically correct as possible. So now they ask the guys to do the 100-year-old method. So the buoy on the right, number 491, look up on the shore when we're parallel with her. Underneath a bent-over tree here, you'll see a white sign with the number 491 on it. That's the lateral position of where that buoy goes. And on the back of the sign, it tells them how many yards offshore to set the concrete block. Now, I know for a fact, I have friends on the canal, they don't use those signs at all. They carry little GPSs in their pocket. They cheat, but who would ever know, right? We're going to spin around, go back in the lot, and what we hope Alex is going to give us this time will be a wonderful, uplifting experience. I know they keep getting worse.
Is that cool? That was the coolest thing, wasn't it? We live near a piece of the Erie Canal, so I was telling him about it.
So he had to rely on those things.
He's going to tie up on us.
If you look over to your left of the powerhouse, you'll see that riprap on the side of the bank. That's actually where the original Erie Canal, the one that I pointed out to you on the way in, reached in our flood of 2013. And right about where we are right now, it formed an island of over 6,000 cubic yards. And this lock closed the whole canal for 3.5 weeks till they could excavate that out. There is no line for where the water was. You look on the left of the stairs here, that's where the water was in '06. But in 2013, there's no place to put the line because it was way over the top of these walls.
Look at the valve. See the waterfall?
Night watchman at the time, that year, was a friend of mine, Bill Miller. And he came down here, and every night watchman, if they had locks closed, had 2 locks maybe to take care of and call in the readings. So he went down to the Little Falls, 4 miles from here, took a reading down there. By the time he came back here, the water had risen so quickly that as he drove into the line of the road coming in here, it tipped his car over, threw him out of the car, ripped off his clothes. He had to climb that tree to the left of the lock, that old tree, to save his life. And he was in there over 8 hours before they came in to rescue him with a big piece of heavy equipment. The next day, he resigned his night watchman position. And now he works on Lot 22 in New London in the dock operator. Gates are closing behind us. The gravity's going to work for us again. The water on the other side of the gate in front of us is 20 feet higher than the water in here. So when Alec walks down to the other end and raises the valves on the end in front of us, that's going to let water back in from the other side of the gate into those tunnels, which are now 14 feet below us. Now, if you remember about those 3-foot openings that I talked about that lead back to the tunnels, the first one on this lot comes out up near that front ladder. Sometimes on a cloudy day like today, this will make a very, very good photo. And I can give you about a 10-second lead time when this is going to happen. So here's the sequence.
This is where we work.
There's water pressure to close the gate behind us. You'll see it's still open about 4 inches.
Look at here.
They don't want to risk 100-year-old machinery, so they have limit switches to shut off the motors before the gate's actually cut. So the sequence, you'll right hear that gate pop shutter. It's a big slamming sound. Doesn't do it every time, but it does it the majority of the time. And then a couple seconds after that, watch the center of the lot up near that front ladder. Water's going to shoot out of both walls, 14 feet down, collide in the center, come up to the surface. Generally, there's a big bubble of air. He gets it right. And then sequentially, every 30 feet, there'll be another one coming towards us and behind us. But only the first one stuffs air. Only the first one would make a good photo. The rest look like a rail switch or manatee switch. They look like the swirl. As I said, I can give you about a 10-second warning on this. So don't bother holding up your arms and getting all tired out right now. I'll tell you when you can get tired. That's your clue. When you're just a few seconds away from the gate possibly popping and the water beginning to come in. So I'd say right now you got about 10 seconds. And you started the process.
There you go.
Here comes the water. I didn't hear the gate pop shut. There it goes now. And here comes the water. And then another one every 30 feet will let out the air. When you're the only boat in the lot, they'll raise us at about the same rate that they lowered us, about 7.5 to 8 minutes. When you have 6, 7, 8 boats in the lot, they go slow because going up, there's a lot more movement of water, and if you have a boat next to you, which you would with 7 or 8 boats in, you only have about 5 feet between the boats, so you have to be careful. So they go a lot easier than the way he's doing it right now. Good time for questions if anybody has them.
We're way down the river. See those buoys down floating in the river way out there? Way out, down below. Look, way out down there. That's where we were. Look. Way out back there. See the buoys? That's where we were. Now we're way up here. Isn't that neat how that works? Now we get out of the lock.
Now let's give Alex, our lock operator, a big cheer. machinery.
Got us in well. Maybe I'll just go. Oh, there goes the gates. The lots. Look. Lots. Close it up. Wow.
Well, when we interrupted our story, the year was 1825. The canal had just opened, was a great success, and had begun to shape our nation. But in 1835, 10 years after its opening, there was a problem. The canal was very busy, and with 3,000 barges, 9,000 mules, and 10,000 men working on it, the canal became the birthplace of gridlock. America experienced her first traffic jam. In fact, if all the barges working the canal were on it at the same time, there would have been a barge about every 380 feet. Back then, it was not unusual to find over 100 barges waiting to go through a lock. Tempers flared and captains began hiring their crew based on their ability to fistfight. It was commonplace for a crew to jump over to another barge, overcome its crew, push it out of line, and take its place in order to get through the lock faster. Time was money. New York recognized they had a problem. In fact, they had two. One bad one, the gridlock and fighting, and one good one, all those barges that were bringing settlers to the Northwest Territories. So in 1835, it was decided to rebuild the canal. But the technology to tame and canalize the river still didn't exist. So all they were able to do was to enlarge the existing ditch. And that's what the second canal was named, Enlarged Erie. The new enlarged canal would be 70 foot wide instead of 40 and 7 foot deep instead of 4. The barges of the original canal could carry about 30 tons of cargo, but the barges on the new enlarged canal could carry 8 times the original, 240 tons. That made it necessary to widen the tow paths to 14 feet, so mules or horses could be teamed up to pull the heavier barges. New York decided not to shut down the canal during construction. They didn't want to stop the flow of settlers moving west and farm produce beginning to move east. Because of that decision and a recession or two, the enlarged Erie took 27 years and $35 million to complete. It wasn't fully operational until the Civil War, 1862. Within 6 months of it fully opening, it once again became amazingly successful, and freight rates were cut in half to $2.50 a ton. But all during the construction period, a new aggressive competitor emerged, the railroad. The first steam railroad built in America was built here in New York State in 1831. It was called the Mohawk and Hudson, and it was built to service the canal, not compete against it. That railroad only traveled about 16 miles, and it took canal boat passengers from Albany to Schenectady. Back then, if you boarded a passenger boat in Albany, it took 30 hours to get to Schenectady due to all the locks between those two cities. By using the railroad, the trip would take under 1 hour. Then you could get on a passenger boat to continue traveling west on the Erie Canal. Railroads were not satisfied with only servicing the canal. They expanded and slowly began to take away the passenger business of the canal. In the mid-1840s, there were over 500 passenger boats operating on the canal, but by the early 1860s, there wasn't one single passenger boat left. The railroads had taken away all the canal's passenger business and continued making inroads into its cargo business. In 1880, almost all cargo was moving by rail, and New York realized they needed to do something to make the canal more competitive with the railroads if the canal was to survive. In 1882, they make a dramatic move. The canal won't be rebuilt again. Instead, it was decided to abolish the tolls. It was a good move, and many shippers came back to the canal. This move gave the canal another 12 to 13 years of life. By the early 1890s, the railroads had drastically lowered their freight rates. Mostly all freight was going by rail, and the canal could no longer compete. It began falling into disrepair, and there was a political debate about what to do with the enlarged Erie. Two factions emerged. One group of politicians wanted to just abandon the canal and bury it. The other faction, led by Teddy Roosevelt, felt the canal had not seen its best days yet and should be rebuilt one more time. When Roosevelt became governor in 1898, he put a commission together to advise him on the canal. The commission recommended the rebuilding of the canal for a third time, provided it would be able to carry larger loads with faster delivery times to make it more competitive with the railroads. Roosevelt asked the chief engineer of New York, Edward Bonds, to design him the most modern barge canal the world has ever seen. There were new technologies for Bonds to work with, so it was possible to do just that. The new technologies included sheet steel, electricity, and the steam engine. These will allow Bonds to abandon the enlarged Erie almost entirely and move the new Erie Barge Canal into the rivers for the first time. He now had the means to canalize the rivers. The sheet steel and electricity would allow the new locks to be wider, higher, and opened by motors. Sheet steel would be used to build dams that would raise the water level, allowing larger vessels to work on the canal. The steam engine would allow them to eliminate the tow paths, put the mules out to pasture, and make all the vessels on the new barge canal motorized. The vessels that will work the new canal will be able to carry 100 times the cargo of the original barges. They'll be able to carry up to 3,000 tons. The number of locks will be reduced from 83 to only 35, achieved through higher lock lifts, resulting in much faster travel across the state. After 5 years of planning, construction of the new Erie Barge Canal began in 1905. The section we're on today was completed in 1914 and is pretty much the same today as back then. The canal fully opened on May 15, 1918 with the completion of the Rochester section. Unlike the first of the canals, the first and newly completed canal was a failure. The year was 1918 and America was involved in World War I. There just wasn't any excess steel to build the large vessels that were planned to work on the canal. At first they had to use steam-powered tugs towing the old enlarged Erie's 240-ton wooden barges. The federal government took over the canal during the war and amazingly put railroad executives in charge of operating it. It's not hard to figure out why the canal did not see the best government contracts during that period. To make matters worse, the federal government did not return the canal to New York until 1921, 3 years after the war ended, and only then did enough steel become available to begin building the large vessels that were envisioned. The canal became successful by the mid-1920s with many different cargoes being carried, including automobiles, grain, fertilizers, military vessels, farm implements, and petroleum products. The Erie Barge Canal's main claim to fame was the transport of oil. In fact, 85% of all cargo carried on the canal was some type of petroleum product. It was difficult in the winter to deliver oil by truck to upstate New York, so all along the canal, tank farms were built for the storage of oil. During the spring and summer, large oil tankers would bring oil to these tank farms where it was stored for winter distribution. If you happen to be traveling west on the thruway, look over to your right when you reach the Utica area, and you'll see some of the Barge Canal's original tank farms. They're still in use today, but now the oil arrives by pipeline and not oil tankers. 64 freight terminals were built along the canal for freight transfer. You may have noticed the old building where we started from. That's one of those original freight terminals built in the early 1920s, and this one was never used for freight. Instead, it was used as a maintenance shed. Today, it's been lovingly restored and updated. Currently, we use this historic freight building for serving lunches and dinners to our motor coach and tour operator groups. This canal was designed to carry 10 million tons of cargo annually, but it never reached its potential. Its peak carrying year was 1951, when it carried a little over 5 million tons. After 1951, cargo began a steady decline. By 1960, cargo was down to about 3 million tons, and in the 1980s, tonnage had slowed to under 1 million tons. The Barge Canal had grown too slow and small to meet the needs of a modern America. There were 3 main reasons for the decline. One was the building of our interstate highway system. With better and more roads, trucking became a major competitor. The second reason was the opening in 1959 of the St. Lawrence Seaway. which could handle large ocean-going ships. This allowed shippers in the Midwest to send their products directly to Europe or South America without having to transfer their cargoes to ocean-going ships in New York Harbor. The final blow was the building of oil pipelines. All of a sudden, there wasn't any reason to ship oil on the canal anymore. The pipelines were more efficient and less costly. Today, the canal is turned into a yacht highway and we rarely see any cargo being carried. Just the occasional turbine being sent from General Electric in Schenectady to Canada. Fittingly, the last scheduled shipment of cargo on the canal was a load of cement from Canada to Rome on board a vessel named the Day Peckinpah in 1994. She was built in 1921 and was the first self-propelled motor ship built specifically to fit and operate on the Erie Canal. At 260 feet by 36 feet, she is the largest artifact in the New York State Museum collection. In 2007, she was saved from the wreckers ball by the New York State Canal Society and is right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around to the north side, the towpath side, where we first looked at the church. But what's unique about this site, this is one of the only remaining places that there's any towpath left at all in this part of the state. It's about 300 feet of it here, a little over 300 feet. Even more importantly than that, this is one of the very, very few sections of the original Erie Canal that's totally dry. You can walk in all this. And that's a public parking lot there. This is 5 minutes away by car. If you're into history and photography, you'll want to come here. Right now, we're traveling in the same direction that the original Erie Canal flowed. When we get past this tree that's overhanging, notice how flat the bank becomes. That is the last remaining 300 some odd feet of an original mule towpath. Now, if you look to the left of that, you're looking at stonework, and that's the south bank of the original Erie Canal. So the canal flowed between the stonework and this bank, so you can see how very shallow it was, how very narrow it was. That is waste weir 16 of Lock 41, of the original Lock 41, the remains of it. So if you come here, you can walk in all this, and you wonder how the devil they cut all that rock without power tools back then. Just an amazing job. All done by German stonemasons all the way across the canal. That's Route 5S. Also, if there's volunteers here, which is quite often, from Thursday on, of the church, they'll let you in the church. Very interesting church. You can look at the gun ports that have been reopened even from the outside.